say, what's the question of the day? I'm Professor Q, so glad to be with you. Question, what are the main components of a food chain? Go ahead at this time and write that down in your journal. So, did you find out what those three components were of a food chain? Think of it. Well, what makes things grow initially? The primary source of energy, the sun. And we have to have producers that make the food, and then we have to have the consumers that consume and eat the food as well. Those are the main components so far of a food chain. But the real question is how does the energy flow in a food chain? So let's have a little bit of conversation, shall we? As I've mentioned before, all of that makes up an energy pyramid. Have you ever heard of that before? An energy pyramid shows the different levels of which organisms will be able to help supply or they consume the energy that is needed. So our bottom layer is the producers. Why is this the bottom layer a little bit larger than the remainder of the top of the pyramid? Because producers are the large amount of entities, of organisms that provide the rest of us the foods that we need. Well, what are some examples of producers, you would say? Plants. We have grain nuts here. We also have pumpkins too. And any other types of trees or grains and grasses, oh my. All right, so the world is limitless with such a variety of different types of producers. Then after producers, we have what comes next is called the consumer. But we have at least 3 tiers of consumers. The first tier after producers is that of the primary, which means first, primary consumer. After the primary consumer, we have another step, which is a secondary consumer, which then is topped off with a tertiary consumer. Can you make an observation about the different types of levels overall in the energy pyramid? Great, that's right. So as you see, as each organism may land in each one of these levels, it starts to get smaller and smaller. So let me ask you this question. Where do you think we might find a grizzly bear? Which particular type of level? Is a grizzly bear a producer? Oh, I hope not. But where would we find it more likely would be in the tertiary consumer level, because that bear's pretty big and will consume the remainder of the secondary and primary consumers. And let's talk about the flow of energy. That flow of energy is very key in the energy pyramid. I'd like for you to take your attention to these particular numbers to the right-hand side. Well, we have 100% by the producers. Then we have 10% for the primary, 1% for secondary, and 0.1 for the tertiary. Well, okay, well that's all nice and good, Professor Q, but what does that mean for me and you? Well, that means that actually it's a 10% rule. Say that, 10% rule. That's correct. So, as that organism is, with the flow of energy reaching from one level to the next, there is 10% of energy that is transferred to the next level. So if you do some mathematics, did you say math? Of course we love math. If you say mathematics, you say 100% divided by 10 is what? 10%. 10% divided by 10? What is 10 divided by 10? You should know this by then. It's 1, correct. And 1% divided by 10 is 0.1%. So, okay, that's all nice and fine, Professor Q, but really, why should I care? Well, I want us to go back to think about that big grizzly bear. How much food does that grizzly bear really need to eat? Does he just find something a little bit to chomp on and able to go on his way? Or do you think that grizzly bear needs a lot of food to fill his big belly? Well, you're right. He does need a lot of food to fill that big belly, because ultimately he only gets 0.1% of that energy to do what he needs to do on a daily basis. To hunt, and to survive, and reproduce. So think of, my goodness, how many salmons does a bear have to eat? Well, that's a lot for one day. That's why they continuously forage through and find food. So, what is this called? It's the energy pyramid. And what's that rule? It's the 10% rule. Well, we have a couple of other special guests today. And when we have Rocky, who's a regular, and then of course we have Little Gray. Little Gray. Hey, 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 what do you say? Little Gray. Oh, well, you say a lot, Rocky. Okay. So, talking about predator and prey, right? So, Rocky was trying to display that how he is actually the predator after the prey. Well, what is a predator and what is a prey? Well, the predator is the one that goes after something to consume, such as in our energy pyramid. And the prey is actually the food, that food source. So in the sense of a predator and prey for a cat, the opposite of the cat, who's a predator, what would be the prey? The little mouse, that poor little mouse. However, today, let's continue on discussing the food chains. The food chains. Okay, so what's so important about a food chain? Well, let's have that conversation now, shall we? Well, a food chain, as you remember, is made up of, that's right, Little Gray, the food chain, oh, see, you're trying to do predator and prey right now, aren't you? Yes, absolutely. Excellent. So the food chain is all about the primary source of energy, well, such as our sun, correct? Yes, that's right. And the sun is up with the little stars in the sky. Okay, so this is the sun, of course. Now, let's take, for instance, we have so many different types of biomes around the world and the ecosystems and the organisms that live within those particular ecosystems. As you see, just think about, as this world spins, oh my goodness, even the ocean is the biome of fresh and salt water. Think of all of those particular interactions between different types of organisms, between the predator and the prey, and how that energy flows. So let's have a conversation, should we? Yes, that's right, Little Gray. Absolutely. Let's have a conversation about down on the farm, shall we? Now, down on the farm, we have different types of organisms. Can you name a few? Great. Well, what about corn? Would we find some corn on the farm? I would think so. What about a little pig? Would we find a pig on the farm? I believe so. Now, let's, looking at this right here, discuss. We have the sun, and we have corn, and we have the pig. So where would that energy from the sun go to? Would it first go to the pig or first go to the corn? What do you say? You're right. That energy would first go to the sun. Now, how do we represent energy and that flow? It's through an arrow. Arrows are very key components to the food chain, and we have to make sure that they're flowing in the right direction. So let's have that further conversation. So which way do you think this energy should flow from the sun? Should I have my arrow from the sun to the organism or from the organism to the sun. Well, one rule of thumb in a food chain is to think about, well, where is that energy going? And to whose stomach will it end up in? So, does the sun have a stomach? Boy, golly, I hope not. So, with that, we would think, well, the sun's energy is going to give it energy to who or to what? Well, yes, the pig can get some energy, of course, but ultimately, the first level is called the what? Producers. Which one of these, the corn or the pig, is deemed as a producer? Correct. It is the corn is the producer. So the sun's energy is going to go to the producer to make the corn grow nice and tasty. And then that energy from the corn will go into the pig. So where and how should we have that arrow? Should the arrow be where the energy is coming up to the corn? Or should it be that the corn is going into the piggy's stomach? I think you're right. The corn's going into the piggy's stomach to give the pig the energy that it so does need. Absolutely. So take a look how we're having this directional flow at this point. Now, down on the farm, there are some predators out and around. So can you name a few? Well, yeah, I think there's one at least. Hooo! Well, that would be, unfortunately, the wolf. The wolf going knocking on all the little piggies' doors, right? Remember that? I love that story so much. Well, what happened to that wolf? Well, that wolf didn't end up too good. However, the flow of energy, should the flow of energy go from the wolf to the pig or from the pig to the wolf? Correct. That flow of energy should actually go from the pig because the piggy, unfortunately, is going to go into the stomach of the wolf. And that wolf's going to gain that energy from the pig. So this is what you call our flow of energy. This is a food chain. We have our source of energy. We have our producer. We have our primary consumer. And of course, we have a secondary consumer as well. Wow, look at that. Wasn't that great? So what are some other types of animals and food chains that we can think of? Well, why is Professor Q wearing this cute little bunny outfit? Well, that's because the question is, are bunnies producers or consumers? You're right, they're a consumer. But what type of consumer? Is a bunny an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? Well, an herbivore is one that eats a lot of vegetables and producers. A carnivore is eats the meat. And the omnivore eats both plants and animals. So which would the bunny be? Correct. The bunny's an herbivore. Absolutely. So with that being said, let's talk about one other type of food chain, shall we? And that food chain starts with the, what was that? The primary source of energy. Correct. So we have our sun. And then, what do we need next? And which direction should the flow of energy go? From the sun to whatever would be next. Well, let's discuss. I have these options. Which do you think should go next? Should it be the grass, the mouse, the snake, or the hawk? Correct. It is the grass as our producer. What should be next after the grass? That grass is going to give which one of these energy, which would be considered the primary consumer. Well, which one of these eats the grass? Of course, it's the mouse. Mice love to eat almost anything by any means. So let's go ahead and place this accordingly. This mouse is it a first or a secondary consumer? It's a first primary consumer. Wonderful. Okay, we have 2 more left. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. So we have now the sun giving the energy to the grass. The grass is going to give the energy and go into this little stomach of the little mouse. And this little mouse, unfortunately, is going to go into the stomach of which one do you think it would be? The snake. That's right. Oh, those snakes, those little sneaky snakes, oh my. That snake is going to consume the mouse, and then it's going to gain its energy. But there's something out there that's going to consume the snake. And last but not least, we have the hawk. My, oh my. Here we go. We have our primary source of energy, our producer, our primary consumer, secondary consumer, and drum roll, the hawk. Okay, wow, you're doing great so far. So we have 2 different types of food chains for an ecosystem to discuss. And one last that we cannot forget, that you have to expose students to all the time, is the variety is under the sea. Under the sea. Let's see what's under the sea. Okay. So we have to have our sun. Do you mean the sun rays reach under the water in the ocean depths? Of course, to a certain distance. Absolutely. So we have our options that are here. Which do you think comes next? So, did you figure out which one should go next? Correct. We need the producer. And the only producer in these cards is the algae. Yum, yum, yum. And who likes to eat the algae? Have you ever seen a shark chomping on some algae? Maybe, perhaps, but they're not vegetarians, are they? I don't think so. So, not all of them they are in that respect. So, now let's talk about, well, what should come next? The fish, the seal, or the shark? You're right, the fish. So the algae is going to go in the stomach of the fish. The fish is going to go into the stomach of the seal. And then the seal is going to go into the stomach of the shark. So now you have your underwater food chain. And make sure that these food chains, as you see, are linear up and down. But could you change them, the model and representation, a different manner? Absolutely. Let's take a look at it right now, shall we? Here's one way of showing this. We have our sun. We have our arrow. You have your algae. We have our fish. We have our seal. And as we're moving forward, we have our shark to see. So this way, students can actually see both horizontal and a vertical representation. That is so key. Think about that, okay? For you and me to be the best of the best, absolutely. So, this is wonderful. This is a food chain. So what are food chains made up of? They're made up of the primary source of energy. They're made up of the producer and consumer. And how many consumers does the energy pyramid consist of? 3. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me today to discuss a little bit more of the food chain. The food chain. All right, and remember, stay strong and good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good gets better and the better gets best. Go. Hey, Hey, what do you say? What's the question of the day? I'm Professor Q, so glad to be with you. Oh, you just caught me. It's kind of sweet. Chomping on my wonderful lettuce as a little bunny rabbit today. And why do I am a little bunny rabbit? Because we're talking about food chains. And right now, I'm representing the food chain. You ready?
Go.
Where?
Start.
Okie dokie.
Okay, you know this is going on bloopers.